Welcome to Girl Quest Books. I'm D. This is my channel. I want to do an official intro. Me, who I am, what books influenced me as a reader. I have a few shorts up already, stuff that I'm currently reading, things that I've done this year so far, stuff like that. But this is about me, my channel, my intro, which Girl Quest Books, Holy Grail, definitely an influence. Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade was my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Loved the father-son dynamic. The Arthurian quest with the Holy Grail really plays a part into why I like it. I named my dog Indiana because that's my favorite of the movies. It's one of my favorite movies. As academically, as I got into college, a little bit professionally, working on medieval literature, especially Arthurian, has also been kind of a big part of that journey for me. And so it kind of seemed pretty simple. Academic, personal, a little bit professional. However, whichever influenced me the most, I'll let you decide that. So, what influenced me as a reader? What made me goes all the way back to when I was in fifth grade. Yes, obviously, I did go to school. I read the books that were required of me. However, I just didn't really care. Like, just nothing really caught my attention. Nothing, you know, hooked me. So I was in fifth grade. There was teachers have their own little library. One teacher let me repeatedly just stick my nose in this over and over, and then at the end of the year, she let me take it home, and I've cherished it ever since. And it is the Star Wars Visual Dictionary. Yeah, it was used then, and it's used now. It's mostly just like at the cover here, but there are a few moments in it that have like descriptions of the character's story or whatever. Loved it. Would brought it home, used it when I played with my toys. Just build that imagination. Yeah, technically not a novel, but it was the first book that got me. Which, as you can see behind me, there's loads of Star Wars stuff. I got two bookshelves with stuff on top, so of course it would be a Star Wars book. The next one is an actual novel. It was a few years later. Um, yeah, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I was in the camp that did not like Harry Potter when it first came out. Actually, was forced to watch The Prisoner of Azkaban several times, and after that, which siblings and stuff, if you grew up with those, you understand. I thought that what, if I'm gonna like this, I'm gonna go back to the beginning and I'm gonna check it out. Just you know, people always say books better than movies, so what better way to understand what Harry Potter is than the book? So my parents picked this up for me when I was in middle school, and this was my first novel that hooked me. I'd read others, you're required to read stuff in school, but this was the one that got me. And I got all the books as they came, up to that point, as many as I can get. I devoured them. I was so into this series that if I was in a class and it was a content area that I just didn't care about, mostly math or science, I'd sneak this out and would pretty quickly get in trouble for reading in class. Yeah, this was the series that hooked me on being a reader. Now the next book took it to the next level, which is Star Wars: Heir to the Empire, the original Thrawn trilogy. This was a Christmas gift from some family, and I had never read a book this big before. I was like middle school, early high school. If I was in high school, I'm pretty sure I was still in middle school, and I was so excited to read more about some of my favorite characters. Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie, 3PO, R2D2, and the new characters that show up in here like Mara Jade, and it was awesome. I really liked reading these. It was, I was a little nervous because at the time this looked really big, and reading a book with multiple point of views and these taking place in different points in different areas was I was a little worried because it was kind of a challenge, but I ended up really enjoying it. I was like reading and having a Star Wars movie in my head, and I read the whole trilogy, and I continued picking up some of these books where I could, but bookstores weren't nearby and I couldn't drive, so this was more of a as I found them as time went on. So, Heir to the Empire, Thrawn trilogy, Grand Admiral Thrawn, he's in the new canon. The Ahsoka show, I think he's going to be I don't know if he's in the Mandalorian movie, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in Ahsoka season 2, Heir to the Empire, or Dave Filoni's movie at some point, whatever it's called. So yeah, Thrawn trilogy was a big deal for me. Taking next step, reading more complicated books. This next one, I didn't read this until after I graduated high school, the summer between high school and college, so around June until right before August, the classes started. So give or take a few days, 2 months. And these came out like at a good time for me because it was a transition period in my life, going from high school kid to, the adult world. A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin. I read every book that was out at the time, which I think was all of them. I think Dance with Dragons was out at that point, so I read all the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire series before I started my freshman year of college. I'd watched an episode or two of the show, and just like with Harry Potter, I wanted to do the books, get it right. So I read these, and as you can see, I still have some bookmarks in there because I in grad school right now, and a little professionally, I'm kind of still diving into Game of Thrones. I'm a bit of a medievalist. I mean, I love Star Wars and some of the hints of Arthurian mythology and stuff that comes from there. But it was these books that made me appreciate the medieval more because Martin does a really good job of incorporating history and medieval literature and stuff like that comes from those as influences in this work. So um, it's been quite a while since I first read these, so it's been many years, and I've been and a little bit more, especially more recently, into the field of the medieval and medievalism, and I've been reapproaching these books from that standpoint instead of just a kid out of high school wanting to read about Jon Snow. Um, so I feel like I appreciate them more because of that. So Game of Thrones, besides being good books, influenced some of my interests academically and hopefully more professionally in the future with this use of medieval literature and history. So that was good. It came at the right time, that transition period indulged. So going from Harry Potter and even Star Wars, because Star Wars there's lightsabers and there's lasers, so there's not a lot of gore. So going from Harry Potter and Star Wars to this was a big jump. So it was that perfect time. And the last one is actually a whole series that I devoured because I love what's on Netflix, and that would be Bernard Cornwell's The Last Kingdom series. And this is about the time period that deals with the Danelaw and the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex and Alfred the Great. And he does this in this historical fiction work by having it center around a character named Uhtred of Bebbanburg. He kind of jumps back and forth between being Ragnarsson and Uhtredson because Uhtred is from Bebbanburg, which is in the north, and he ends up like going through this journey where he's actually raised by Danes, but then his uncle has stolen his land, so he's on this journey. It's a very long journey, it covers 13 books, but they're all about this size, and it's all about him navigating this time period, and these are so good. I really love these books just for the sake of them being books because they're really well done. The characters I love, like Alfred, but also characters like Finan, this Irish warrior who there's some twists in his story towards the end. And these really continued my academic interest into the medieval. And that's because Bernard Cornwell includes a historical note at the end of every one of his books. And I loved that. I'd get to the end of the book and I'd instantly dive into this historical note and learn more about the actual history. And getting at the end of these books made me decide to look more into medievalism more and just how much the history and literature of that time plays into some of my favorite things and led to me finding other things that I enjoyed when it comes to this stuff. So these are some of the books that defined my reading journey from kid to adulthood. I do read other things. I have a bunch of Star Wars books from Legends and the new canon, but I've got Dune right there. There's some popular history books alongside my Bernard Cornwell books. I have dipped my toes into Brandon Sanderson. I'm in grad school, so it's a lot. I just finished Joe Abercrombie's The Devils, and I finished that, and I really enjoyed it. I was in a reading slump reading it, and the fact that I was in a reading slump and it was such a good time I can't wait to reread it, and I'm definitely planning when my TBR list is more manageable to read his work uh, devotedly. So if you like Star Wars, if you like fantasy, uh, if you want to give me suggestions, Girl Quest books. You want to hang out with me while I'm talking about some of my favorite stuff and give me some suggestions? That'd be awesome because some of my favorite books these last 2 years have come from suggestions online, like Joe Abercrombie, Red Rising, The Ninth House. I had a professor loan me that, and it's like dark academia, and I loved it so much. I bought the book and the sequel and read them both. So, yeah, Girl Quest books, I'd be happy to have you here as I talk about books.